Great. So thank you so much for coming, and it's an honor and a privilege to introduce something that's very close to my heart. Something that actually technology does, which can leverage to bedside care without the difficulty of jumping the gap of science fiction. Because we hear about AI all the time, and we really don't think what it does, except for Terminator and mass extinction and human race annihilation, because we generally have these extreme realistic scopes for things. But apart from the many things H.G. Wells did, apart from warning us about the future, he also wrote very extensively about these machines which you could drop blood into and you could get a result in 5 minutes straight. And that day actually is no longer science fiction because it is science now. And that's exactly what AI can do to make our lives better in the niche that you think is the trust area. So the thrust area has to be defined for you, and then find what makes that monotony go away and how you can use that to your advantage, because the machine doesn't get tired, it learns, and it is not going to take over the world until you say, I accept. So there's always a fail-safe. Having said that, the most important part of any diagnostic journey, in my opinion, is that of the pathologist. You might come to a history, diagnosis, beautiful biopsy, surgery, but unless you know what it is, because everything looks like a jackfruit until he tells you, or he tells you this is a neoplasm or this is something else. So the real cornerstone of a journey of a patient actually lies in the quality of the diagnostic pathology. Or what is this diagnosis? What about the microscope, or the microbiological elements of it, or whatever. It is somebody that is paraclinical, preclinical, which is the real asset to a hospital's quality-oriented outcome. Because the rest of it is more or less commonplace, everybody does well. The cytopathology is one such forte which kind of makes the average pathologist and the elevation to an excellent pathologist. Because that is really the skill. To look at these cells and tell you what it is. And how I wish Einstein could tell us what he thought about relativity, but he never put it into code. But if you could get the human interface of the cytopathologist to tell you, this is why I call this cell a malignant cell, this is why I call this a lymphocyte, this is why I call this a cast. And if you could put that into a machine, and you could teach it to learn and relearn, you could take a load off the pathologist, because cytopathology is where 60% of the time goes, looking at into urine and blood smears. Everything else is more or less already AI, everything is automated. You put in blood, you get answers. You are thinking about chemistries, which are currently almost completely automated. The counter is automated, it only red flags you will need. But when it does a red flag, that's when this comes in, and then you need the cytopathologist to tell you, this is okay, this is not a problem. What if a machine can do all that within seconds? Give this answer to the clinician that this is microcytic anemia. Just give him iron, don't give a bone marrow. These are the joys that can change things. And out of 1.2 billion people in this country, we make about 80,000 medical graduates annually, behind 566 medical colleges in India. This is the largest in the world. 1,500 pathologists come out every year. So you can imagine we have a whole lot of pathologists, but the Indian Association of Pathologists and Microbiologists are only 5,600 in number, registered. So that kind of gives you the scale of the dearth of access, and among them, the good quality care or specialized areas where a smear has to be evaluated, differentiated between a blast or something else. Probably that number will fall short by another 70%. So here we need this care, which is probably the most commonest ailment, anemia, or something very basic, because everybody does a blood test, whether you have a headache or you have urinary tract infection. And that's basically the cornerstone where everything starts from. This dearth can be addressed, and the machine, if you could teach it, and you could bring in AI elements to teach, for example, what Imran sees and what Imran knows can be transcribed into the body of a machine, then Imran is perpetually legend. He is in the system forever. And whatever he teaches, the machine will learn. So, the real twist of AI is you got to find the first area, and when you do so, you got to work on it. My first twist was in BC cancer, where I saw they dropped out the operative costs. The turnaround time between 12 OTs, which run full time, to change their number of instruments, count their mops, and bring back and say the OT is clean and everything is clean, and we didn't leave anything inside, takes about 30 minutes. And they just put the patterns of all these machines and all these clocks, all the scissors and scalpels by the AI, before and after. It can differentiate a mop that is bloody and not bloody, what is intestine and what intestine, and where you've left something just that the count doesn't match, and you're done within 3 seconds. So you find that thrust area, address it, and AI has a solution for you, for which you can find an answer to. So the whole point is to try and attach people to a hub of AI, try and bring robotics, data, and these solutions together, which is possible. SIGTouple and I have been working for the last 3-4 years trying to bring in some kind of care to the bedside, and they've done a lot of work on these annotations. And eventually what it means is that I could put this kind of a machine in a very resource limited situation with 1 Mbps of internet. You drop in blood, and hopefully the machine will give you the peripheral smear within 5 to 10 minutes, urine analysis within 5 to 10 minutes, without the pathologist's input. Of course, at the end of it, the pathologist vets it. But the physician gets answers quickly, and you can really change the course of the journey. And it takes a whole lot of time away from the pathologist to do more quality stuff. Reagent costs come down, technician costs come down, training exercises, and databases improve. This is one project that I was very, very pleased about, because we wanted to deliver it in a place where nothing else could happen, where there's just a pathologist. There is no pathologist, but just run by a technician. So this is the Gudalur Adivasi Hospital, which we've been attached to for some time. I have been as a dermatologist taking care of the 400 sickle and HAL populations there. So this machine kind of gives a great deal of ease to the whole work course, because now that there is no pathologist, but the answers are clear. You don't need a pathologist. Somebody sitting here, like a difficult case after the AI interprets, comes to somebody like Imran or some other pathologist in the resource, and he agrees with it. An AML can be diagnosed sitting in Gudalur, and I think that's the biggest joy that you can bring into transforming these cases. So thank you so much. These are the scope that I think AI can deliver, and these are very easily possible. Right now we have heme pattern cytology, but over time CSF analysis, body fluid analysis, histopathology, gram staining. This would be all computer driven, because it's after all this pattern recognition. So I request Renu to take over, and thank you to the panelists for facing the occasion. Really look forward to hearing from you about your first-hand interface about using this machine. Thank you.
A very good evening to everyone out over here. I think I just talked to all of you without that mic. I'm Dr. Renu. I'm a hematologist by profession. Was an HCG for many years before I joined SIGTouple. I'm the Chief Medical Evangelist right now at SIGTouple here. And I thank all of you for taking all your precious time today evening and to grace this CME out here, which we are hosting here today. Thank you, Dr. Imran, for giving the opportunity. Thank you, Govind, for giving us the opportunity. So a little bit about SIGTouple. We have been an AI-based company for the last 5 years, and we have leveraged. What we do is we leverage the power of robotics data, and we culminate all of that to give you AI-powered solutions, mainly in the pathology and the ophthalmology space. And in pathology, our flagship solution was Shaunak, which is the peripheral blood smear analysis on an AI-based platform, followed by Shrava, which is the urine microscopy, which is also on an AI-based platform. All of this is CE certified and ready to go into the market, and we have been having multiple deployments across the country, a lot of pilot work which is being conducted across the country, a lot of satisfying results, one of them being Gudalur, which Dr. Govind has mentioned. And so we are very excited to take this, on a big scale out over here in India and probably even outside India at some point of time. And we have some of our very eminent panelists here today who are using the device, and they will be giving you their first-hand feedback on the kind of experience they have had in using this and how it's brought about a kind of efficiency and productivity in their working lives, not just for the pathologist, and also how this has eased the function for the clinician as well. I mean, for a clinician, it's about getting accurate reports at the right time, so that there can be a timely management for the patients, the right kind of diagnosis for their patients, the timely management of the disease. And let's see how this can actually transform the healthcare space, where this would be very beneficial, not just for the lab perspective, but just also for the hospital on its own, and how it kind of brings about all of us in healthcare as a community together, as a close-knit network, where everything is visual-based evidence, where you can look, believe, have confidence in what the AI gives, and actually interpret and apply that in our working day-to-day lives. So this is what it's going to be about. We'll keep it interactive. We have a couple of cases from, we have a couple of from Trustville. We have a couple of cases from Vikram Hospital as well, and that's where our panelists are from. So without further ado and wasting any more time, I would like to introduce our panelists for today's evening. We'll start with Dr. Pratima. So Dr. Pratima is the HOD of Lab Medicine, Vikram Hospital. I would like Dr. Pratima to come up here on stage. It's a very eminent pathologist, a very good colleague of mine in the past as well, and we have worked together on multiple things, and she has got various publications in her name and a very good interest in both onc as well as non-onc as well as heme as well as histopathology. She's an expert in her own right. With her we have Dr. Shefali as well from Vikram Hospital, who's a consultant pathologist. So Shefali has done a fellowship in oncology from HCG and then after that joined Vikram Hospital, and she's been working with Dr. Pratima ever since, a very young and dynamic pathologist in her own right. We have Dr. Shruti from Trustville, consultant pathologist from Trustville. So yes, me and Dr. Shruti have been interacting ever since we have placed the device here and we have done the pilot. Very diligent and has shown a lot of interest in it, and found it a pleasure to actually have done the pilot with her. And of course we have Dr. Imran, senior consultant pathologist for Trustville Hospital. Dr. Imran and we have known each other for many years. We were together in HCG when I joined, he was still there. So yes, we are friends, and very happy to have you here today and to share the same space with you here today. Welcome. And last but not the least, Dr. Govind himself. No, Dr. Govind, please, we would like to have you there on stage. So even Dr. Govind, yes, we are all, like I said, it's a close family. We've known each other for a lot of years and we work together. And Dr. Govind has been the most dynamic physician that I have ever known, especially in BMT practice. And it's an honor to have him over here as well. So ladies and gentlemen, these are our panelists for the evening today. And without further ado, we will start with the CME. So we had a very successful pilot at Vikram Hospital, a mixed bag of cases, and Dr. Pratima and Dr. Shefali will tell you about the feedback and experience. We have a couple of cases put up just to give an overview of how the AI works. As Govind already showed you the picture of the AI 100, it's one device where multiple solutions can work. You know, your blood smear analysis, your clinical pathology, a lot of other things in the pipeline like bone marrow, CSF, etc. All of that can be done only on one device. It's very user-friendly. You have an optics which scans the slide, the smear that gets inserted into the robotic arm. It's the camera on the top which extracts the images, puts it up on a cloud-based platform where the AI-based models process the images out over there, and then they are visible for any pathologist to look into and approve that report on any internet-enabled device. So all you need is an internet connectivity. There's nothing else which is required for this device. The footprint of the device is also very small and can be just kept on a bench top, 0.5 by 0.5 by 0.5 meters. So let's start with a couple of cases from Vikram Hospital which Dr. Pratima and Dr. Shefali found quite interesting. This is the workflow which I already mentioned about. Dr. Pratima, would you like to say how has a workflow generally been in manual, and how today with the AI has your workflow actually changed?
Good evening everyone. So when Dr. Renu came and approached us to do a pilot study and discussed about this AI platform, we were pretty skeptical of using it initially because we found it very tedious. You see this and seeing the what we see under the microscope and seeing on the computer, we have to get used to, because we are not software engineers, we are all microscopists. So it was difficult for us in the first 1 week, and I was always telling, okay, I can see 10 slides and, rather than seeing one slide, no matter, we can just start using it, you get used to it. So after the second week, we found it little better, and when we started comparing the machine value to the microscope as well as the AI images on the computer, it was quite easy for us to identify, and it made it very easy, especially with the platelets. So the platelet, the pseudothrombocytopenia, which is a terror for everyone So even on the microscope, we can miss the platelet counts, because if we don't scan the whole slides, it may be at the edge of the smear. So if we miss that, we will say platelets are low and they'll give an STP, and the next day platelet will be 2 lakhs and they will shout at us. Yesterday you turned 20,000, today you are telling 2 lakhs. did you miss a zero there? Like, So we have had many cases where patients have come and fought with us and all. This really helped in 2 cases for us, both in the hospital, even at home, because after 7 o'clock we had got a slide and pseudothrombocytopenia, platelets were 25,000, and then we picked up the platelet counts on the sectable images, and we said no, it is normal, no need to get a STD or get scared anything about that. And second one was very thing is with eosinophilia, it will show 25, you have to sit and count like, are they really 25? And this AI, it was very simple, all eosinophils came in one scene, it really made it. I said, Taka, hey, it's good man, that's how I I told them it's fine. So these were the few initial changes and how I got into the system of the AI
based remote. So these are a couple of cases which Dr. Pratima has pulled out from her archive. Would you like to just any one of you?
Good evening everyone, I am Dr. Shafati. So here we had a case of severe anemia. So the HB showed it was 6 grams. So we asked our technician to immediately scan the slide because the clinicians were like, what is it? So when we scanned it, it was microcytic hypochromic, and the AI has also picked it up very well. So it is showing all the microcytes and it has flagged also. And then the blood transfusion was arranged for, and so this really helped them to manage the child immediately, like without having to wait for us to come the next day and then tell them what it is. So we saw it on the system, and then the treatment was started off after that. So this was one case.
And in fact, sitting from home, they were actually able to give the peripheral smear report, type in the entire report, and everything under a bird's eye view, where you have the visual evidence, the AI report, which is giving you the ICHS guidelines-based grading and everything, along with the entire report as such.
Okay, so this is another case what Dr. Pratima has already spoken about. So this was a case where the platelets were low, and the machine picked up the platelet films, and as she said, even us as pathologists can miss it at times, and this becomes very important when there are procedures to be done, for example cardiac procedures or a renal biopsy where they test us what is the platelet count. So sometimes we can miss, and it has picked up because it is scanning the entire slide, taking all the images. Next was a case of pancytopenia in a child, and most of the times these cases the WBC counts are very low. So even we usually count only some 20 cells, 30 cells, but because of the AI, it has scanned all the views, we can actually count more cells and see if there are any abnormal cells also. So this was another case. I think I hand it over to.
Yeah, again, this was a case which came after 7 o'clock or something most of the cases what we have reported confidently at home, it was on our personal laptops or on our mobiles. This I think was on my mobile only. Saw count was high, last were there, and I said immediately called up the physician, the ER doctors and all, and said it is leukemia. Ma'am, you're sure it is leukemia? I said, yeah, you're at hospital, no, I'm at home. So this was pretty easy for us to confidently tell,
Based on visual evidence.
yeah. And it was the blast and all was very nicely made out on the system.
Use the cursor. I don't think they will appreciate any of this.
So you have the advantage of a full FOV view. This is what the AI gives with the visual evidence out over here. So these,
yeah. So this is the similar view what we see under the microscope, because I'm one.
Yes.
So this is exactly what I see under a microscope, which we are seeing on the system. It's like initially it was the photograph we would take and every system and thing and we would project, but the same view we see under the microscope. So it is same as what I'm seeing under the microscope, but you are seeing on the system.
and if you can see the traceability, what are the grids, the cells that are seen out over here, the AI has picked it up, and these are the boxes that just has denoted that, so then if you can backtrace and see which were the cells picked up from that particular FOV. So you have that evidence, and you have the visual evidence. For example, if it says there are 400 odd blasts, you will get the visual evidence of all the 400 blasts. And the pathologist with just a simple scroll mechanism will be able to just scroll through the images and just approve that and be satisfied that yes, these are blasts and what the AI is giving, and that's the confidence that they get. And with the push of a button, they'll be able to approve that report. All of that, I think, happens within a minute. And once the approve button is pushed, you can send the email to the clinician. The clinician also have the visual evidence of the same. If they are connected to the cloud, you want to get another second opinion. For example, there's a junior pathologist who wants to get a second opinion from any senior pathologist anywhere in the country. All you need is the access to the cloud for that senior pathologist, and in real time you can get a second opinion. So you don't have the challenges of logistic challenges of transporting that slide to get a second opinion. Now, if I'm there after an opinion from Dr. Imran, I just need his access on the cloud and give him the access. He'll be able to see it real time and tell me, Renu, yes, this is leukemia, go ahead. Something of that sort.
Here it's no longer you will have a second opinion, you will have third, fourth,
Multiple
opinions you can have. So many clinicians, I shouldn't tell, they will always say they will have one role model pathologist, it's a send their leg. So it's very easy for us to send the images.
Oh, there were many times, in fact, when I would be reporting a smear, Dr. Govind would come into the lab and say, I want to see it myself. So we had this double-headed microscope, and then he would sit on the other end and actually see it. And then he would be, probably he would trust me that yes, I'm giving the right diagnosis up to there. So all I need is this. I'd say, go and just come onto the cloud and say, have a look at it yourself. So, it's just made the clinician and the pathologist come closer, and there's so much visual evidence, it makes it easy, to discuss a case, to give any suggestions, further evaluation, recommendations for flow cytometry. I'm sure Dr. Pratima sitting at home, or Dr. Imran would be able to give recommendations for flow cytometry, what markers to put up to the technician, just being at home looking at the case out. This is the IGs. So, imaging granulocytes.
So again, the count is high now. They want to know whether it is leukemia or it is infection or what it is. That's very easy for us. Like the toxic granules, the immature, the shift to left, all are very easily identified, and it picks up and gives us the number also. So normally we have to sometimes literally do the DC manually. It's made our life simpler with just seeing that, and the best part of it, all those images come to there. So we are confident whatever it has been picked up and numbered is the same as what is we are seeing. So we may make a mistake, but here it is quite accurate.
In fact, we give these references as well. So even if there is a junior pathologist, they'll be able to look at that as a guidance and then go by what the AI report gives. So there are reference images for almost every bucket which is being classified.
This will be a very good opportunity, or if it comes to the medical college, because I remember when we were in medical school, nobody used to teach us about neutrophil, it's only the textbook and everything. This is
We
really...
started that 2-3 places we are.
MD programs. They're people who pass out, they can't even read the PS properly.
First pilot we had was in that COVID scenario, and after we probably finished, we will talk about that.
This is another case, schistocytes is again very important. It's a critical, I always kind of say it as critical value. You see schistocytes immediately also they can tell the doctor they are schistocytes, they take directly for dialysis.
So schistocytes are very important for non-nephrology and hematology people. The moment you see schistocytes and hemoglobin down, it's a massacre. So we need everybody in to make sure what's going on. But for the most part, pathologists won't tell you what is the percentage of schistocytes seen. Because the whole treatment is based on whether it is above this or below this. Is it just because of some valve there or infection? So the schistocytes are a very, very grey area. And
this really helps because we have to give the percentage of how many schistocytes per formed are immersion field, and then correlate with whether there is associated thrombocytopenia. All that you can literally get it on one image because you will be seeing the schistocytes itself. Otherwise, many a times we find it occasional schistocytes we say it may be a manual error when they are making a smear or where they have not stained it properly, you can get an abnormal. But here it is, we are very sure what we are seeing is schistocytes. Yeah, this was another.
I think this was a very big highlight. I think we should take about this.
So this again, like the clinician was not suspecting there was thrombocytopenia, they were thinking of dengue. But again, a smear, just like, I was very happy. First time we picked up the malarial.
And I think we bought this call on a Sunday,
Yeah.
probably, to see if there was empty or what is wrong with this particular
So
smear.
was like, as soon as I was like, I was very confident, okay, fine, empty is there, positive. And so the immediate treatment was started. Otherwise, normally, we try to be in the hospital, but of late going to the hospital will be a little, the traffic is crazy. To see one slide, I have to spend 1 hour with all our this thing. So this really helped us to give a confident diagnosis. Normally, we do the card test again, but sometimes card, we don't know whether it is the card can be positive unless we see a positive malaria on the slide. The card is not always reliable. That's the thing that we have to. They say card is positive, but if you don't see the thing, he may have malaria some 5 months back, 6 months back. So card will be still positive, but we have to see the malarial parasite on the smear to say it is malaria.
And especially if the parasitic index is very low, it takes a very long time to screen, and according to the WHO, at least you should have seen 100 fields of view before you can actually call something negative, and even then there are times it has been missed. So this obviously picks up even that rare malarial parasite sitting somewhere. So definitely
If it is a very classical trophozoite form, we can pick it gametocytes we can see, but ring forms is still difficult.
Yeah, so ring forms
difficult under the microscope also. So the human intelligence is also difficult. AI will also be difficult.
So these were some of the feedbacks given by Dr. Pratima in our post-pilot report, where the ease of use, the effective in identifying abnormal cells, the time spent by pathologists on manual microscopy versus using an AI-based platform, eased out the training for the new pathologists and the new trainees who had joined the hospital, and definitely the eye strain and fatigue. I remember there were many days I would go back home and I had this migraine in my head because from morning till evening I'm looking into the bright light. Definitely all that has decreased a lot after using the screen to report rather than the microscope. And of course the reproducibility, the standardization, accuracy, the confidence in reporting and giving a correct report for the patient. I'm sure it has aided the pathologist and made it more effective and productive for them.
I'll add a few more benefits. In my opinion, the fact that you have no moving parts, no reagent costs, which is about 2 lakhs a month, easy. Technician costs, preparation is standardized with the heme prep. So I think there is actually a lot of actuarial costs which come in addition to better reporting, but that would probably show up on a P&L sheet. But it would be visible with it. It really is a significant saving if you can save about 2.5–3 lakhs on usual reagent-based methods.
What about the sensitivity, specificity and all that?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So we have done multiple validations, both internal and external, and of course when we got our CE mark, we had to give the evidence of all our statistical analysis based on the data that we had done, and I'm talking about billions of data points before we calculate the statistics. So our specificity and sensitivity for all the 5-part is more than 98%. I would say if you actually look at it, you'd hardly find a misclassified cell in the 5-part bucketing. Immature granulocytes and atypical cells in blasts, it's very sensitive. We've actually put a paper in the hematocon where we had more than 90% sensitivity for picking up atypical abnormal cells in blasts. We are actually further down the pipeline, we are reclassifying them into atypical lymphocytes versus lymphoblasts versus reactive lymphocytes. So such kind of work is also there on the platform today. It's just about a software upgrade that we do need to do. As far as the RBCs, I think we had excellent correlation compared to the manual microscope. Manual microscopy always has been our gold standard. According to the ICH guidelines, we had the lambda values and the values for statistical parameters for RBCs, which we have highlights, in fact, where it has superseded manual microscopy. For example, monocytes, platelet clumps, as Dr. Pratima herself suggested. There were many times things were missed on the manual microscopy, but the AI was able to pick it up, extract it, classify it with accuracy, and then showcase it to the pathologist. So yes, I can tell that with confidence that it has very high levels of specificity and sensitivity and accuracy for all the parameters which is out there.
Have you had a discordance with the machine anytime that no, I don't agree with this, this must be reclassified?
This more often is with what she said, with the reactive atypical lymphocytes. and motor sense. It is always, that's what I, even
So
then for us, it is very
there's a
difficult.
subjectivity.
Any double-blind study where you check manual versus AI?
Yes, so we always have 3 pathologists and they're all blinded. In fact, even for our FDA studies, that's how we had designed our study protocol, where you have 3 pathologists and they are blinded. In fact, they themselves don't know the manual microscopy, and finally when they go on the AI platform, so it's all masked. So the IDs are masked, the patient's details are masked, so they just get a smear, they get an image on the AI. And we do not give them simultaneously so that the biasness is not there. We make them do the manual first and then we give them the images which are like, all randomized. So the study is always randomized when it is given to them.
Correct. So what is the data on that?
The concordance discordance data was acceptable with a 95% confidence interval for your smear.
Yeah.
And if I remember, we did a COVID pilot. That's where it really got me going, because RT-PCR in the time started out was a 6-hour process, 4-hour process. RAT wasn't being accepted as standard. Here was a test which you could just drop blood and you could get a MOT cell right there, and it is in the smear far before immunological processes start. Days before. So what takes 4 days, in half an hour you're seeing those cells. And if you can then put that patient as a high COVID suspect and put him away, your secondary chain kind of breaks. That per se was an excellent paper with a 95% confidence interval. That these turned out to be RT-PCR positive later. We were able to decrease the disease burden by cutting the chain. Is that already printed?
Yeah, so
JCO?
in the Indian Journal of Pathology and Microbiology, so it has been accepted. It is in production, so I think in the next what you call the release, it would be there. Then I'll circulate it out over here. But it is in production. It is going to be released in the next.
Where I see the real thrust for this would be in a Chamrajpet or in some bus stand or in some kind of Anand lab, some kind of real nondescript area which has a 1 Mbps internet. May not even be consistent. It has the ability to store the machine, the images, and then send it when the internet comes back. Or a Goodaloo like how we got it. So those are the places where they get the correct pathological diagnosis. Otherwise, just go around in circles doing more and more investigations. With this, COVID data itself was so impressive that with 5 very clear segment points in the lymphocyte, in the neutrophil, it was able to differentiate. Which is basically what Madam would do. Just that she can't do it consistently. It depends on breakfast, getting here, her mood, a lot of other things. It cannot be consistent. We are all human beings. We can't do that. We can't do the same thing. It takes about 15 minutes for a peripheral smear.
I agree with him because this happened when COVID started. Initially the cases were very few. I saw 10, 15 cases and I was worried, such bizarre cells are there, bizarre cells. The 16th case, when the cases started increasing, it became monotonous. I couldn't concentrate. If this was there, I think it would have been easier because I have already identified these kind of cells are there. But at that time we didn't have this instrument, otherwise I would have made the best use of it.
Yeah, it could really change the way the burden of secondary chain transmission would have happened, because this would have been immediately with symptom, probably a day within the symptom.
We got it out in Maldives. That's where we did the study. Right?
Is that very good?
Yeah, that is it. So.
Is the application still only for peripheral blood smears now, or have you
For urine
expanded?
microscopy as well. So right now the CE mark that we have is for peripheral blood smear and for urine microscopy. But yes, within 6 months we have a lot of other things in the pipeline because there's a lot of back-end work which is happening parallelly. We're looking at body fluids, we're looking at bone marrows, and then cytology, and then histopathology in that order.
This will be more useful for us when we do a lot of cytologies.
Absolutely.
And
So
for
valves
those,
can be identified brilliantly.
for especially to do our rapid on-site evaluation.
Absolutely.
For those, it
So
will be very
in
useful
fact,
for us.
as a feasibility testing and an experiment, we've already run CSF smears on Shonil. I've done this myself. And you can actually see it on the telly. You can see the blast in the CSF. You just, on the FOV microscopic view, which Dr. Pratima was mentioning about, you can actually see the blast. And imagine if a pathologist could just see that, or a clinician could just see that, you have your diagnosis just there. So it's just that it has to go as a separate sub-product. Like Shonil Shrava, we will have another name on the software and we will say that this is for body fluids. But can it do? It already can. It's just about getting the CE mark and putting it up there.
What is the lead time to develop any one test, say like CSF?
So it depends on the data points. So for example, if we do get a collaboration and we get a lot of data points on CSF, So it takes about a month for training, another month for testing by the data science team. So within a quarter, once the validation mark is, we get the CE mark for that. Within a quarter, actually, an AI model can be ready to be released.
Two things they did like this was, one was semen analysis. So they have a model which works for semen beautifully. I don't know why they don't find it as a commercially viable device to sell, but I find that an excellent tool because you don't have to waste time at all. You just drop it, it tells you in 5 minutes. And not the fact that it is oligospermia, it will tell you the motility, it will tell you every single thing, probably better than the reports that come out
For
with
semen analysis, in fact, we had a video as well. So for the morphology, you have the still images, and for the motility, we actually do the video where you can see the tracking of the different grades of motility.
I think it's a thrust area. Somebody has to find what they want and make this thing do it. For example, I find that the smear is the thing. So my whole thrust is on the cytopathology of that, and therefore from there on, gram staining, AFB, hem-onc, infections are all the time there. So those are those areas.
We also, since you mentioned ground stain and AFB, we have a publication in the Optics Express where we had done a feasibility of ground stain and sensitivity to ground stain as well as for AFB with very, very high sensitivity levels of picking up and classifying ground stain and AFB bacteria on. Of course, we have not got the CE mark yet, it's there in the back burner, we just need to do that, but we had very promising results in microbiology as well.
So once you buy the hardware, you just keep giving
It's just about upgrading the software. It comes in a phase. We take it up, we get it validated externally, we get that amount of data points, we give it for annotation to the pathologist. The AI models are built up on it. So testing, training, and then again another external validation, the CE mark, and it's out for release. And then we just come and upgrade the existing software. So it's the same device, there's nothing which will change on that. We just add another software.
So finally, Imran can disagree. If he says, no, I don't agree with this, he can change the whole damn thing. But he should have valid reason to not call this a cell why it is being called so. Because he has all the 200 plus for him to see. And it's just beautiful because it makes his life easy. He doesn't have to be staring into something. At 1 AM, if I have a smear that he would like to see, I think those are the real pain points which I was trying to address through this journey. I am very happy because to some extent we've got something that works in as remote a place like Google Base. So yeah.
Let's move to
Depends on
Dr.
how fast the computer code writers type. The Python and all that.
Eventually the AI, as you start getting more and more data, will become more efficient than...
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So it's deep learning. It's like teaching a child. The more you teach, the more it picks up and more
Maybe
it
we should
learns.
talk about how we taught the machine.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
something.
So, you give 1,000 data points to 3 different pathologies, they annotate, we feed it, we augment it, the models are built, that's point number 1. But the more the data you bombard, and in fact, even as we are talking today, billions of data points are fed for the deep learning and the machine learning. And the AI relearns, unlearns, relearns, and up to a point of time, like when you mentioned, we get that benchmarks of sensitivity and specificity, which actually tops manual microscopy. It's only then when we stop. And again, lab to lab, the cases differ, the pre-analytics differ, the staining differs from lab to lab. So the kind of cases that we have fed into the AI models, from very minimally stained slides to darkly stained slides, so even that matters for a pathologist. I think Dr. Pratima would agree with me. So we have fed even those kinds of variable data where the AI has mastered over a period of time. And as Dr. Imran would keep using it, or Dr. Shruti keeps using it, and they keep, supposing they make an edit, they call another cell, they reclassify that. After a period of time, the AI actually relearns that, and keeps relearning it until a time comes when the AI itself, spits it out. So that's the beauty of deep learning and machine learning. It's all about pattern recognition, foreground, background, patterns, granularity. So it's not like your automated analyzer, which is based on light principle and scatter technology and all of that. This is actual morphology-based, evidence-based learning that the AI does. And that's why it is more accurate than any of the hematology or any other analyzers that you would see out.
How do you overcome bias in AI?
Yeah, like I said, so we have a panel of pathologists initially who annotate. So we get experts, like hand-pick experts from the field. So if I want to look at onco training for the AI, like BLAST and atypical cells, I literally hand-pick pathologists, who have been day in and day out looking at those cases, right? And so I will not go by one pathologist's annotation. I will have a team of them. In fact, we have 50 plus on a panel of pathologists all across the country, and we give the same data across the 50. So we see where the consensus is among amongst these experts. And even where there is no consensus, we get them on a call. We have a consensus meeting where, you know, they are justifying, no, we should call this cell as this, we should call this cell as that. And of course, that's backed the evidence because they have processed it in the lab. They would have done flow cytometry or something on those cells. They would have run markers. And with that, they will be able to accurately tell us, let's call this cell this or let's call it that. So a lot of this to and fro work keeps happening. And until we get the consensus data, that's when it's given to the engineers, the data scientists inside. And then they will take it up and further rebuild the model. They use that for testing and training, and then again another round of external validation happens across the doctors. So that's why it takes that long by the time a solution actually comes out, because we need to be so accurate. When we finally put it out into the market, it has to be very accurate.
One neutrophil could have a couple of million data points. Every possible neutrophil has been scanned. So that cannot look any more than that. Of course, nature is inventive. It can show a new neutrophil. That can always be added. So generally, it's all been annotated by a lot of people. It's not free from error, but then neither are we.
Yeah, so definitely there would be that 0.00 amount of error, but I would rather call it subjectivity. I wouldn't call it error. Because if pathology was black and white, I think it would be very easy. I think Imran, Shruti, all of you, I think would agree. I don't think everything is so black and white and you can just do a picture matching and learn pathology. There's always a grey zone, and that's what we struggle with. And someday we hope to get that out over there so that it's easy for pathologists across to take a call, what to call it and what not to call that.
History be taken account while interpreting the
Absolutely.
The
Absolutely.
final report will come to somebody like me who's asking for this. So instead of waiting for madam to give it to me after 3 hours, I'm calling her. The machine will spit it out in 5 minutes. Somebody clears it or not, at least the machine report will be given. So then you can take a call depending on what you want.
There was a trend of liquid biopsy was there for malignancy evaluation for many, it was there 5-6 years back. Now the thing has gone out. So with this, can we start reintroducing this liquid biopsy still?
It's a totally different thing.
No, because we do it in blood samples only.
Yeah, that is liquid
Because for
biopsy is
lung cancers and all, we try to find.
No, there you are finding the genetic material.
Yeah.
Here you are seeing the cells directly.
So can we?
There your genetic material
Mutations are present.
So
That
true.
is different.
So that's a different
Circulating tumor cells, they have to use flow cytometry.
No,
They can't
circulating
use it on
tumor
site.
cells, you cannot see them
On
on the
site.
thing.
You can't
Those
see.
tumor cells will be circulating 1 in billion, there will be one
Okay.
tumor cell. 1 in billion red cells. So that is totally different. That you have to use proper
Flow cytometry and
immunofluorescence probes and antibody antigen concept and all that. And you have to run the blood through that flow cytometer, and that will tell you whether the tumor cells are there or not. If it is there, how many cells per microliter. So that's a different concept altogether. So here we are just simplifying what is peripheral smear, number of cells, what you upfront see in a day-to-day routine microscopy. We are just bringing in an AI application so that everybody said like you can where there is resource scarcity and all could be used under so many places, and where there is high workload and those types of things. Just like Dr. Gokul mentioned. Liquid biopsy is another ballgame altogether. I think they'll get into in some time. I think into that area also.
Let's just go through quickly a few of the cases from Trustwell, which have been reported by Dr. Shruti and Dr. Imran. I think platelet stands out first. I think that's one thing every pathologist pet, or the hatred, like you don't want to miss that platelet count, giving a wrong platelet count. I think that's what was picked up by them as well. Dr. Imran, if you would like to just speak a bit about your experience on
I just thanks Trustwell Group and Sitatul for giving me this opportunity, and actually it's a responsibility. At the point of time, actually my colleague Dr. Shruti was physically present, and she went through the experience throughout this validation process and experience and all. I'll be just representing, I'm happy that she's out here. I'll be just reading out the things what is depicted on this slide. And more or less our experience are just the same than what Dr. Govind and Dr. Pratima Shefali said. So just to reiterate those facts, we have about 6 slides. So this is a case of same as spurious thrombocytopenia. The and you know that by the time the machine reveals it, the cell counter reveals it as pseudo-thrombocytopenia. I mean, it will call it as thrombocytopenia, then to call it pseudo or false or true, slide has to come to the microscopist, and that might take a long time. So, depending on the threshold of the place you are sitting in, with high volume or low volume and all that. So, but this best part of, as you have already seen, is it already depicts the visual evidence of what it has seen already in the microscope. The AI has picked up and said that these are all there are good number of platelets. Don't worry, these are all clumped up. So I don't have to get the slide, put an oil, and you know, I can use my time for other critical purposes and all that. So this goes straight to the end user. End user could be the pathologist or could be anybody directly who's ICU or in the wards or any physician. So that's it about it. And anything, it's a visual kind of you know what do you call it, extravagance or trees. Yeah. So it just displays it. What is to wait for the technician to make, I mean, to give us the slide, and so it just pops up on your screen, and you know, there is some danger or there is no danger at all. Okay, you can at least assure, and moreover, the end user himself will get that alert message immediately. Just as Renu said, you should just have an internet, some minimal speed internet with you wherever you are. So that's it. These are NRBCs where the cell counter, I mean, every blood sample before it goes to your microscope, it goes to a cell counter. And cell counter can give us, it's a wonderful machine, but it gives some flags and pseudo high counts, low counts. So this AI will actually correct those mistakes of the cell counter, you know, by before sending it to a pathologist or to an expert, it picks up and it's trained to pick up cells which the cell counter has said it's not there or it's more or less, like that thing. So the cell counter counts all nucleated cells as WBCs, but it's only the pathologist who can say that no, those are not WBCs, some of them are nucleated red cells. So with this shown it, even before the pathologist, the AI machine is able to tell you what it is. And very high sensitivity, just like Dr. Pratima said, it's like for blast, it is a real blast for all of us. Like it cools down our matter, and we just put it directly to the end user because that's where the actions should start, you know. So that where the AI will come directly. It's like your friend, you know, like wherever you are, wherever not there, you're just it's there always around you. You just have to have an internet connection. And the cell counter can mistake any large, ugly-looking or sort of distorted-looking nucleated cells in the blood as a blast or some other cell. But we can actually differentiate them using this lovely image analysis software from the cloud, that these are not blasts, these are monocytes, as simple as that.
So, for one of the questions that when you had asked about the deep learning and the machine learning, this was way back. In fact, we had got a case of AML M4, M5, and we thought, okay, let's just put it and see what. This was even before the BLAST platform was built. And they were monocytoid monoblasts, they were pro-monocytes, they were monocytes. And amazingly, it had classified those blasts into unclassified bucket, because obviously that time it was not programmed for it. So I went to the back end to see how it took out those cells. Of course, it didn't understand to call it blast, but however, it did take out those monoblasts and classify them separately. Where did it take it out from? So when I went to the back end and I saw the data, they were actually coming from the monocyte bucket. So the initial categorization was like pro-monocytes, monocytes, and these monoblasts were all in one bucket. And then the AI itself, it's actually, you know, it gives me shivers down my spine sometimes, because I feel it has a brain on its own, you know. We're not even taught it yet.
It does.
I mean, yeah, now I do believe that it has a brain. It's like, you know, making a robot and one day the robot actually behaves like a human. It thought itself and took out the monoblast and just put it into unclassified, because pathology, when we teach our postgraduates, first is the lineage, so you have the granulocytic series, the monocytic series, and these promonocytes and blasts that come from that series are the monoblasts. The AI had learnt it on its own.
First year PG work, then it did second year PG work,
Yes.
consultant work, and then it gave you the answer.
And then it gave us the answer. So,
But we count maximum is about 100 neutrophils to make our DC count 100 white cells. But here it's limitless. It can start from 200 to 2000.
you can do
You
the
just
whole
have to tweak the software
the
like what you
software
want.
settings, all the way from the feathered edge to the thick area of the smear, which is a discernible area of the smear where the morphology is discernible. It will pick up each and every cell out there and extract it and classify it. So these were some of the benefits which Dr. Shruti had mentioned. Dr. Shruti will just tell a few words about your experience when you did the pilot with the AI.
Good evening, everybody. I would like to say that the software is very user-friendly and it's easy to understand, and the team is very helpful when it comes to any of the problems which you face with the software and how to use the software and how to actually go about seeing each and every case. As everybody has already pointed out, one is it's kind of resemblance to the microscopic view which you enjoy, so you don't have to drift far away from the microscope. Even when you are seeing the image on the computer screen, you still feel that you are using a microscope, and it kind of gives you a confidence when you are alone, as in when if you are an alone pathologist in a resource limited setting, it kind of, you have another head to nod for whatever you feel. So, and you can kind of, after going through all the normal peripheral smear which we included for the remote, for the pilot study, most of the cases were normal, I believe. So, after going through the data which the AI machine produces, you kind of believe that machine, and there is no doubt as to what the machine is saying as wrong. You will definitely find confidence in the machine within a span of 2 to 3 days when it comes to its ability to pick up the kind of WBCs and even the RBC morphology. As Dr. Renu has already pointed out, there are different stages of development which is yet to happen. I would highly recommend this machine as Sir said, it is very useful in a resource limited setting wherein there isn't anybody to actually look at the smear and it gives an answer. Imagine myself in a remote place wherein you can get any disease anywhere, so there it's like, it's a help for you. And here it's like, it was like a companion to me for whatever the time I have used this machine. And rest of the points of advantages of the machine, I think all of them have already pointed out, the remote access and its speed and you not wanting to come on a Sunday and all that. Thank you.
That's very important, isn't it?
But there are many cases, you get an APML in the middle of the night and go and put the gun on my head, and say, can you give the diagnosis? I wish I had this when I was in HIV.
I'm going to make this bet because I get hounded for this everywhere on every single platform that
Yeah,
I'm
he's got
operating.
used to that.
But when an APML comes, what else do you do? I mean, it's not like you can wait till tomorrow. You don't even know it's an APML until somebody drives the car, goes all the way there, puts his head and tells me, I come all the way. And it won't be stained. Or it won't be stained the way I want it. And with all that, it's difficult because he'll be dead by tomorrow. So you've got to do the extra mile and I think that's always been the love-hate relationship with any hematopath and any hematologist. I'm sure all of you face it. But this changes that because now I don't need, actually that's another comes to that. Is the pathologist being replaced slowly?
No, I would say a big move for that. It aids the pathologist, makes the pathologist very productive, and then that's what we are trying to do out over here. We're not saying this is going to come and then the pathologists are going to get out of their jobs or anything. It's definitely going to revolutionize their space where their bandwidth can be used for further things in the lab. Rather than looking at your baseline screening test, that's where the AI will take over. But they can use that bandwidth to do further other things in the lab. Everything is not about doing this.
It won't. Like the senior pathologist is training the AI, and the junior pathologists are getting trained with AI, and when they become senior pathologists, they will be training the junior AI. So this cycle will be going on. So it's just not replacing, they will be working side by side as
like how Dr. Shruti actually said, like the companions, actually
just as we said, we thought when radiation people thought that surgeons will lose the job, which never happened. It was 50 years old story. So still, surgery is still the mainstay of any cancer treatment.
We still need a pathologist to sign the report.
Definitely.
Yes. Medical
Yes.
That's why they like it, but they don't like it so much. It's a good friend to have. No, 10 years from now. 10 years from now, I think there'll be far limited pathologists, because all these very pattern-based description, there'll be far few physicians as well. There'll be surgeons, because surgeon's job is a surgeon's job. I don't think eventually there'll be enough AI skill to do all this. Maybe at this point in time you can sit in America and operate in India through the Da Vinci. But you can't make the robot operate everything. You still need the surgeon. So your jobs are okay, but the rest of us slowly are going to get, I think that's how it is.
So
That's
also,
how it is.
it's not one thing, the clinicians can't blast the AI. So we are there, like, if something is like, who have given that? So they can't blast the AI and the AI won't take that.
AI will be proof.
The clinicians were always, their data used to be very much visible to their colleagues and all that. Only which undemocratic setting was the histopathology or the microscopy. Nobody want to, peep into the microscope and say you're wrong. But now we are all have to be very careful because AI is there and it's all democratized.
So the clinicians, patient has no fever, he's doing well, but his neutrophil count is high. Send it to Anand diagnosis. So that's a standard dialogue with most of them. With this AI, sir, I can send it to US, whoever you want to. It's the same count.
But then if you can show the physician, I'm seeing toxic granules, it is shifted to the left here on your phone, whole bodies. Just start an antibiotic. I mean, that's basically what needs to be done.
You can't tell that one, because I did once. I don't know anything about pathology, you can't show it to me. This is what I got.
Maybe that will take some time, but slowly they will realize that proof is proof. Cells don't lie.
Yeah. No, many a times we have taken a photograph, sent it, sir, see this. I don't know pathology.
The one thing we cannot escape is technology. That's there. Whether it's this side of the fence or that side of the fence. So if you are pro technology, then you will survive.
Now with those two patients, one who had a thrombocytopenia, had spurious bleed bone marrow, so patient saved a marrow unnecessarily.
And blood transfusion.
And the other one, the last one that we had.
Schistocytes? Last monocytes.
Monocytes, yeah. No, the gentleman who had just reactive lymphocytes and we wanted to start broad spectrum antibiotic because that is the lowest risk, sick patient in the ICU. When there is not a single toxic neutrophil, you don't have to start broad spectrum or even a very high-end antibiotic or even an antibiotic. There is absolutely no reason that everybody in hospital requires an antibiotic. So there are clarities that you can bring in which can change patient safety and outcome, provided we are also as physicians willing to figure that out, that little bit, because these are not answers given with emotion. This is the cell, take it or leave it, this is the evidence. I mean, what the mind does not know, the eyes will not see. So if we can just bring that up a little, I think we can really change a lot of decision making and cost.
I put up just a few slides to show you about the urine microscopy because even body fluids would be very similar. Here it is unstained and body fluids will be just staining it and the cells would be highlighted. So if we can do urine, you can do any body fluid out of this. So it's just a matter of time that our software will get upgraded to the rest of the body fluid samples as well. And this is how you get the visual evidence for the same. This was in a child, one had hematuria and the other had UTI. We were able to pick this up. In fact, we reported this for Mulur, sitting right here in Bangalore. I was in a cafe when I got this call. Can you imagine? I was in a cafe having coffee and I got this call and we have these two patients, it's critical and we need to know, we have no pathologist today. I have my laptop, I have my cell phone with me wherever I go. I opened it up, in 2 minutes I was able to give them this report and they were very happy about this. I mean, this is the difference. The remote access, I think, is the biggest difference that one can actually bring about. We did a lot for the hemoglobinopathies as well, sickle cell disease, THAL cases and all of that. We've been contributing for diagnosis on that front as well. As you know, there are pockets in India which are rampant with these cases. So we do plan to revolutionize healthcare with AI100 going forward. Early screening, monitoring, recommendations for further evaluation, treatment options and plans. We want to broaden the horizons of AI ability of AI to have it in your laboratory. I mean, it should be a tool that you need to work with going forward. I think it should be also introduced into the curriculum of teaching so that students also get exposed to this in a very early phase, rather than coming later on into their careers. And we want to enable doctors and to provide quality healthcare and then quality of life. Because after all, we're dealing with humans at the end of the day, and that's where it's very gratifying. It's been very satisfying to see this journey to where we are today, and we definitely want to take it to further limits down into the future. And that's what we are about, and revolutionizing the whole healthcare space. We have a lot of scientific achievements and a lot of recognitions. We've been part of a lot of conferences, workshops, we have publications in both tech as well as medical journals. We have a lot of patents which have been applied and filed. Clinical trials which keep happening, dime a dozen of them, and across medical experts. And we hope to strengthen this platform. Even with Trustwell, we hope that we could see areas of interest, collaboration, which would make sense to you and also for us, and we could collaborate on that and take the platform further and build a very robust pipeline for the future solutions that could possibly go on the AI 100. With this, yes, I do come to the end of my talk. I would like to thank each and every one of you present here today. I know it's a busy day at the hospital, and to take time out and come like this is not a joke. But thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the panelists. Thank you, Dr. Pratibha, Dr. Shefali, Dr. Imran, Dr. Govind, and Dr. Shruti. It's been a pleasure actually having a talk like this, and I think everybody really enjoyed it. We do have a small token of appreciation for all of them. So this is for Dr. Govind. Dr. Govind, thank you so much. And we hope to have your encouragement as always going into the future. Dr. Imran, thank you so much for your inputs. It should be a pleasure. Dr. Pratibha, thank you so much. It was indeed really very gratifying listening to all the feedbacks that you had given. We definitely hope to, look into all the points mentioned, and any suggestions in the future also will definitely take them up for improvisation in the future. And Shefali, Dr. Shefali, thank you so much for gracing us. And of course, a very big thank you to you, sir, Dr. Madhusudan, Mr. Prashant, for giving us this opportunity to have the CME here, and it's definitely been fantastic. And I hope you all enjoyed and got a good awareness of what AI can do, and we hope to definitely collaborate with you in the near future. Thank you so much.